Hello everyone, I hope you are all doing well. Your birth chart is not a suggestion, it is a cosmic blueprint, a precise celestial map drawn at the exact moment you took your first breath, encoding within it the very frequency of your soul's purpose on this earth. Ancient Vedic seers called it the Janma Kundali, the birth horoscope, and they understood something that modern career coaches are only beginning to whisper about, that your professional destiny is not accidental, not arbitrary, but astronomically ordained. In the Vedic system, 10 celestial bodies, 12 houses, and 27 lunar mansions weave together into a language so precise that it can tell you not just what you are meant to do, but how you are meant to earn, lead, create, and serve. At the heart of career analysis in Vedic astrology sits the 10th house, the Dasham Bhava, the most powerful house in your chart when it comes to profession, reputation, authority, and the mark you will leave on the world. The sign that occupies your 10th house, the planets sitting inside it, and the lord of that house, where it is placed and how it is aspect, these three factors alone can reveal whether you are built to command boardrooms, tend to the sick, craft stories, or trade across continents. But the 10th house does not work in isolation. The second house governs accumulated wealth and family vocation, the 6th house rules service, competition, and daily work, and the 11th house determines the scale of your gains and the networks through which prosperity flows to you. Then there is the planet Saturn, Shani Dev, the cosmic taskmaster, the great teacher of discipline and structure, who governs careers built through sustained effort, institutions, law, engineering, and the slow, unshakable rise of those willing to do the deep work. Opposite to Saturn's methodical path stands Jupiter, the guru, the planet of wisdom, expansion, and divine grace, whose placement in the chart can reveal callings in education, finance, spiritual guidance, law, and any field where knowledge itself becomes the currency. The Sun and Mars bring an entirely different energy, solar ambition, martial courage, pointing toward leadership roles, government service, entrepreneurship, and professions where authority, assertion, and the courage to act decisively become the defining tools of success. And Mercury, that swift-footed messenger of the cosmos, governs communication, commerce, technology, and analytical thought, its strength or weakness in your chart often separating those who rise through intellect and articulation from those who must seek other pathways to their calling. Then there is Venus, the planet of beauty, refinement, and desire, whose placement in your birth chart quietly determines whether your greatest professional gifts lie in the arts, luxury, hospitality, fashion, or any field where aesthetic sensibility and the ability to create beauty become a kind of currency the world is willing to pay for. Jupiter, the great teacher of the cosmos, is perhaps the most generous of all planetary indicators for career. Its presence in certain houses almost guarantees a calling toward wisdom-based professions, law, education, philosophy, finance, and any role where your capacity to guide, counsel, and expand the understanding of others becomes the very foundation of your livelihood. Saturn, often feared yet profoundly misunderstood, is actually the planet of disciplined mastery, and those with a strong Saturn in their chart are quietly being shaped for careers that reward sustained effort, precision, and long-term thinking, such as architecture, engineering, law enforcement, mining, and the kind of institutional work that requires patience most people simply do not possess. The moon governs the world of feeling, nourishment, and the public mind. Its position in your chart can reveal a natural pull toward healthcare, counseling, hospitality, food-based industries, or any vocation where your ability to read the emotional temperature of a room and respond with genuine care becomes your most powerful professional asset. Rahu and Ketu, the shadow planets so central to Vedic thought, deserve special attention in career readings, because Rahu, the north node of destiny, often pulls a soul toward unconventional, foreign, or technology-driven fields, while Ketu points toward mastery already carried from past lives, sometimes manifesting as inexplicable genius in spiritual, research-based, or deeply technical disciplines. Now, planets alone do not tell the whole story. It is the house they occupy that transforms their energy into a specific life domain, and in Vedic astrology, the 10th house stands as the supreme house of career, public reputation, and one's contribution to the world, acting as a cosmic stage upon which all your planetary actors must eventually perform. The lord of the 10th house, whichever planet rules it based on your rising sign, becomes your career's guiding force, and its strength, its placement, and the planets it associates with will dramatically shape whether your professional life unfolds with ease and recognition or demands years of struggle before your true purpose becomes visible. Equally critical is the second house, governing accumulated wealth and the voice, and the sixth house, which rules service, daily work, and the act of solving problems for others. Together these three houses form what Vedic astrologers call the professional triangle, and reading them in combination reveals far more than any single house ever could alone. Consider also the Dasamsha, the D10 divisional chart, a specialized subchart calculated purely to examine career and social contribution with extraordinary precision, and for serious practitioners of Jyotish. No career consultation is ever truly complete without studying this deeper layer of the cosmic blueprint that lies beneath your main birth chart. What makes Vedic astrology so remarkably practical for career decisions is that it does not simply describe what you are, it illuminates what you are here to do, and with the right understanding of your planetary placements, you begin to see not a rigid fate, but a living map of your highest potential, waiting to be consciously and courageously walked. And so, having laid the foundation of the Dasamsha and the living map of your highest potential, we now descend one layer deeper, into the very heart of the 10th house, the Bhava that ancient Jyotish masters called the Karma Bhava, the house of righteous action, public purpose, and the work your soul agreed to perform long before your first breath on this earth. The 10th house is not merely a section of your chart, it is the summit of your entire horoscope, the peak toward which all other houses climb, and whatever planet sits within it, rules it, or casts its powerful drishti upon it, becomes a defining architect of the career you are cosmically designed to build. When a strong sun occupies or aspects the 10th house, Jyotish speaks of a soul drawn toward leadership, administration, and luminous public recognition. These are the individuals born to stand at the center of institutions, to carry authority not as a burden but as a calling, much like the Kshatriya Dharma described in the very verses of the Bhagavad Gita. Saturn in the 10th house tells an entirely different and profoundly instructive story. Here is the planet of discipline, structure, and karmic accountability placed at the very apex of ambition. And what it promises is not instant glory but enduring legacy, built slowly, brick by brick, through patience, mastery, and an almost monastic dedication to craft. Mercury ruling or illuminating the 10th house opens the path of commerce, communication, analysis, and intellectual enterprise. This is the placement of the strategist, the writer, the educator, the market mind. Someone whose greatest professional instrument is not brute force but the extraordinary precision of thought, language, and discernment. Venus touching the 10th house weaves the threads of beauty, harmony, and creative enterprise directly into one's life purpose, and Jyotish has long recognized this as the signature of artists, designers, luxury brand builders, and those who serve humanity by making the world more refined, more graceful, and more deeply felt. Mars in the 10th house ignites ambition like a forge, producing the energy of the entrepreneur, the engineer, the surgeon, the soldier, someone who must build, compete, and conquer a chosen domain, and without a worthy challenge to direct that Martian fire. Such individuals do not simply feel restless, they feel cosmically incomplete. Jupiter's influence upon the 10th house is among the most auspicious signatures in all of Jyotish, often pointing toward careers in teaching, counseling, law, spirituality, and any field that expands human wisdom. For Jupiter does not merely want its native to succeed, it wants the native's success to become a source of knowledge, grace, and elevation for others. The moon's connection to the 10th house introduces an emotional and public dimension to career. These are individuals whose work must nourish, must serve, must respond to the ever-shifting needs of communities and families, and one finds here the counselors, the healers, the hospitality visionaries, and those whose professional fulfillment is inseparable from the feeling of being genuinely needed. What becomes luminously clear as we read these planetary signatures is that Vedic astrology does not prescribe a single narrow profession. It reveals an energetic frequency, a dharmic direction, a quality of service that can be expressed across many fields, and the wisdom lies not in rigidly matching a planet to a job title, but in understanding the deeper soul force that each planet is urging you to embody. And so we turn now from the planets themselves to the houses, those 12 sacred divisions of the sky that act as the stage upon which planetary energies must perform, and among them, none speaks more directly to the question of career and worldly purpose than the 10th house, known in Sanskrit as the Bhava of karma, the very seat of one's visible destiny. The 10th house is not merely about profession in the modern sense of a job or a salary. It is the house of one's dharmic contribution to the world, the place in the chart where the soul's deepest work becomes visible to society. And what sits here? What rules here? What aspects this house reveals the texture and the direction of one's life mission in extraordinary detail. When a powerful planet occupies the 10th house in the birth chart, it does not whisper, it announces, it declares, and the native often finds themselves almost magnetically pulled toward a specific mode of expression, as though the universe itself has already placed the career seed in the soil long before the individual consciously begins their search. But the 10th house does not stand alone. Its ruler, wherever it sits in the chart, carries the career energy into a different dimension of life, and when, for instance, the 10th lord sits in the second house of wealth and speech, one often encounters speakers, teachers, and financial visionaries whose work and prosperity are woven together in a seamless and almost inevitable braid. Equally significant is the rising sign, the Lagna, because the first house is the body and the will, and its ruler's relationship with the 10th house becomes a defining thread in the career story, indicating whether the individual will build their calling through personal initiative and bold individual expression or through partnership, inheritance, and the accumulated momentum of lineage. The second house itself deserves close attention in any career reading, because it governs accumulated wealth, family resources, and the power of voice and communication, and a career astrologer examining these three houses together, the first, the second, and the 10th, is already holding three corners of the map that reveals how a soul intends to earn, to serve, and to be remembered. Then there is the 6th house, often overlooked in popular discussions but deeply revelatory, for it governs service, competition, daily work rhythms, and the capacity to overcome obstacles. And planets placed here or ruling this house often produce individuals who thrive precisely in the most demanding professional environments: the surgeons, the lawyers, the military strategists, the tireless entrepreneurs who find energy in challenge rather than comfort. The 11th house of gains and networks acts as the great amplifier in any career chart, and when it is powerfully connected to the 10th, one sees not just a career but a career that reaches, that expands outward through community, through association, through the gathering of like-minded souls into movements and enterprises that far exceed what any single individual could build alone. Jupiter's transit through the 10th house or its relationship with the 10th lord is one of the most auspicious configurations a career chart can carry, for Jupiter does not merely bring opportunity. It brings the right opportunity at the right moment of spiritual readiness, and those who understand this transit often speak of periods when doors opened not just easily but meaningfully, as though the universe had been preparing the circumstance all along. And if Saturn is the sculptor and Jupiter the bestower, then the Sun, Surya, the cosmic king, is the soul's signature upon the 10th house, the mark of one who is meant to lead, to illuminate, to stand visibly before the world and carry the weight of authority with both pride and responsibility. For wherever the sun touches the 10th, it demands that the native become, in some meaningful way, a source of light for others. A strong sun in the 10th house or ruling it speaks of careers in government, administration, leadership, medicine, or any field where one must hold command. These are not people who thrive in the shadows, but souls whose dharma requires a stage, a title, a visible position from which they can radiate purpose, and the ancient texts remind us that such natives carry the karma of kings, whether they sit in a boardroom or a village council. Yet the sun's placement alone is never the whole story, for in Vedic astrology the planets speak in relationship, in aspect, in conjunction, in the quiet diplomacy of mutual reception, and a sun conjoined with Mercury in the 10th, for instance, begins to paint the portrait of the communicator leader, the one whose authority flows through words, through intellect, through the ability to articulate vision with such clarity that others naturally follow. This brings us to Mercury itself, Buddha, the planet of commerce, communication, and quicksilver intelligence, whose connection to the 10th house or the second house of accumulated wealth often marks the chart of the entrepreneur, the trader, the writer, The analyst, someone whose livelihood is built not through brute force but through the precise, elegant application of mind. In the old Vedic texts, merchants and scribes were not considered lesser than warriors or priests. They were understood as essential threads in the fabric of civilization, and Mercury's dignity in a chart was seen as the blessing of Sarasvati herself, the goddess of learning, channeled into the practical art of exchange, of negotiation, of giving the world something useful and receiving abundance in return. When Mercury occupies Gemini or Virgo, the signs of its own rulership, and simultaneously influences the 10th house, the chart begins to whisper of careers built around information, technology, teaching, writing, or the kind of business that moves fast, adapts constantly, and thrives on the currency of ideas rather than the weight of tradition. And in today's world, such configurations are producing the architects of the digital economy. Venus, Shukra, the planet of beauty, refinement, and desire, brings yet another flavor to the 10th house conversation, for Venus connected to the mid-heaven speaks of the artist, the designer, the diplomat, the one who succeeds by making the world more beautiful, more harmonious, more pleasurable, and the ancient rishis understood that the creation of beauty was itself a sacred act, a form of worship offered through professional life. A well-placed Venus in the 10th or ruling the 10th from a sign of dignity can manifest as success in the creative arts, fashion, film, music, hospitality, luxury goods, or any enterprise where aesthetic sensibility becomes a professional superpower. And what is remarkable is how often these natives report that their work does not feel like labor, but like devotion, as though the boundary between career and calling has dissolved entirely. Mars, the fierce and ambitious Mongol, brings a completely different energy to professional destiny, for wherever Mars touches the 10th house in strength, it ignites ambition like fire touching dry wood, and these are the charts of the warrior entrepreneurs, the surgeons, the engineers, the athletes, the military officers, souls who need challenge, competition, and the satisfaction of conquering something real in order to feel professionally alive. The key to reading Mars in the 10th house wisely, as the ancient astrologers were careful to teach, is to understand whether that fire is refined or raw. For a Mars in exaltation in Capricorn or in its own signs of Aries or Scorpio brings disciplined ambition, the kind that builds empires through strategy and courage, while an afflicted Mars may scatter that same energy into conflict, impulsiveness, and the restless inability to commit to any single professional path long enough to master it. From Mars, we now turn to Mercury, Buddha, the swift-footed messenger of the cosmos, the planet of intellect, communication, and commerce. And when Mercury forms a powerful relationship with the 10th house, it produces some of the most recognizable professional archetypes in Vedic astrology: the brilliant writer, the sharp businessman, the persuasive lawyer, the gifted teacher, the analyst who sees patterns where others see only noise. Mercury's gift to the 10th house is the gift of the mind made visible. These are the careers built not on physical strength or spiritual authority, but on the precision of thought, the elegance of language, and the ability to translate complex ideas into something the world can use, purchase, or be moved by. When Mercury occupies or aspects the 10th house in its own signs of Gemini or Virgo, the professional expression becomes especially refined. Gemini Mercury tends toward careers in media, marketing, and multidisciplinary pursuits where variety is not a distraction but the very engine of excellence, while Virgo Mercury produces the analyst, the editor, the accountant, the systems thinker who finds profound satisfaction in making things precise. What is particularly fascinating in the ancient texts is how the rishis understood Mercury not merely as a planet of cleverness, but as the planet of adaptability. And this is why Mercury-dominant 10th house charts so often belong to people who reinvent their careers multiple times, who wear many professional masks with equal authenticity, and who can enter almost any field and find a way to make their mind the most valuable thing in the room. But Mercury, being a neutral planet in Vedic astrology, takes on the color of its companions, and this is where the reading of Mercury in the 10th house demands careful attention to planetary associations, because a Mercury conjunct Jupiter produces something entirely different from a Mercury conjunct Saturn, and the astrologer who misses this nuance will misread the professional destiny entirely. Jupiter's influence on Mercury in the 10th house tends to expand the intellectual pursuits into teaching, philosophy, finance, and law. It elevates the communicator into the counselor, It turns the writer into the author of wisdom rather than merely the author of information, and in many classic charts of great teachers and scholars, this combination appears with striking consistency. Saturn's conjunction with Mercury in the 10th, by contrast, tends to slow the mercurial energy and discipline it into something more structured and long-term. These are the technical writers, the researchers, the engineers of language and logic, the professionals whose minds work methodically rather than brilliantly, and who build careers of quiet, lasting significance through patient, rigorous application of their gifts. Now we arrive at one of the most spiritually layered conversations in Vedic career astrology, the role of Jupiter, Brihaspati, the great guru of the gods, in determining professional destiny. And what is immediately remarkable is that Jupiter's placement in or influence over the 10th house is rarely about one specific career path, but rather about the quality of purpose that runs beneath whatever career the native chooses. Jupiter does not point to a single profession the way Mars points toward courage-based fields or Mercury toward intellect-based ones. Instead, Jupiter in the 10th house asks a deeper question of the chart: is this person's work connected to meaning, to growth, to the elevation of others? Because when the answer is yes, Jupiter rewards abundantly, and when the native pursues purely material gain without this undercurrent of purpose, Jupiter's blessings in the 10th house tend to feel curiously hollow no matter how impressive the title or the income. The professions most naturally aligned with a strong Jupiter in the 10th house read like a map of humanity's highest callings: education, law, medicine practiced with compassion, spiritual guidance, publishing, finance with ethical grounding, diplomacy. And the common thread running through all of them is that the native is in some way a bridge, connecting others to knowledge, to justice, to healing, or to truth, which is precisely the function Jupiter performs in the cosmos itself. Now we turn to Venus in the 10th house, and the shift in energy is immediate, almost palpable, because where Jupiter carries the weight of wisdom and duty, Venus arrives with something entirely different: beauty, refinement, and the deep human hunger to create something that moves people, that touches the soul before it ever reaches the mind. Venus as a career planet is one of the most misunderstood placements in Vedic astrology, because students of the subject often reduce it to art and fashion and leave it there, but that is like describing the ocean by pointing to the shore. Because Venus in the 10th house speaks to value in its broadest sense, to the human desire to exchange, to connect, to make life more beautiful and more harmonious at every level of experience. The fields Venus naturally governs from the 10th house are luxurious in their range: fashion and design, yes, but also music, cinema, hospitality, high-end retail, cosmetics, fragrance, interior design, jewelry, and all industries where the product is fundamentally an experience rather than a utility, where the customer is not merely buying a thing but purchasing a feeling, a version of themselves they wish to inhabit. What makes a Venusian career distinct from a Mercurian or Martian one is the native's relationship to aesthetics. This is not someone who tolerates beauty as a side effect of their work, but someone for whom beauty is the work. Someone who cannot fully invest in a profession unless there is elegance somewhere in the process, unless the thing being made or offered carries some quality of grace. But here is where many natives with Venus in the 10th house find themselves standing at a peculiar crossroads. Venus also rules comfort, and comfort unchecked becomes complacency. So the shadow side of this placement is a tendency to avoid the necessary friction of building something great, to settle into roles that feel pleasant but never stretch the soul toward its actual creative potential. Venus is also, critically, the planet of relationships, and its placement in the 10th house frequently indicates a career where the native's professional success is inseparable from their ability to connect with other people on a human level, to make clients feel seen, to build partnerships that run on trust and warmth, which is why so many successful negotiators, brand strategists, and luxury sales professionals carry strong Venusian signatures in their charts. The sign Venus occupies in the 10th house refines this picture considerably. Venus in Libra in the 10th, for instance, creates a natural arbitrator, someone drawn to environments requiring balance and aesthetic judgment, often thriving in law with a creative dimension, in architecture, or in any field where two parties must be brought into harmony. Venus in Scorpio in the same house carries an intensity and magnetism that frequently draws the native toward transformative creative work, toward film, toward psychological branding, toward anything that pierces rather than merely pleases. Now we must introduce something that changes the conversation entirely, the concept of Yogacaraka planets, because when we speak of career in Vedic astrology, identifying which houses a planet simultaneously rules is as important as its placement, and certain planetary combinations create what the ancient texts call Raja Yoga, a configuration of power and recognition that elevates a career far beyond the ordinary trajectory. The classic definition of Raja Yoga involves a connection, through conjunction, aspect, or mutual reception, between the lord of a trine house and the lord of a quadrant house, and when this connection occurs in or with the 10th house, the result is a chart that does not merely indicate a career but indicates a calling that the cosmos itself appears to have cleared space for, a native whose professional life seems to move with a kind of quiet inevitability toward positions of influence and recognition. What the ancient astrologers understood, and what modern practitioners sometimes overlook in their enthusiasm for individual planetary interpretations, is that no placement exists in isolation. The 10th house is always in conversation with the 2nd house of accumulated wealth, the 6th house of daily work and competition, the 11th house of gains and networks, and the entire chart breathes together as one integrated map, which is precisely why Vedic astrology rewards patience, because the deeper you look, the more the story reveals itself. And so, before we move forward, let us sit with that image for a moment, the chart breathing as one integrated whole, because it is precisely this organic unity that leads us now to one of the most practically powerful tools in the Vedic astrologer's arsenal, the concept of the Atmakaraka, the soul significator, the planet that has traveled the greatest number of degrees in your birth chart and therefore carries the heaviest karmic signature of your entire life's purpose. The Atmakaraka is not merely a technical curiosity, it is the planet that, according to the ancient Jaimini school of Vedic thought, represents the very core of what your soul came here to learn and to express. And when this planet connects meaningfully with the 10th house or its lord, the career is no longer just a livelihood, it becomes the arena where the soul's deepest curriculum plays out in the most visible way possible. If your Atmakaraka is the sun, the soul craves authority, recognition, and the responsibility of leadership, not out of vanity, but out of a deep dharmic compulsion toward governance and the kind of work that carries genuine weight and consequence, which is why so many solar Atmakaraka natives find themselves restless in subordinate roles no matter how comfortable those roles might appear from the outside. A moon Atmakaraka, by striking contrast, pulls the soul toward caregiving, nourishment, and the management of human emotion at scale. These are the counselors, the hospitality leaders, the brand builders who understand instinctively what the public feels before the public itself has articulated it, and their professional mastery comes not through force but through an almost psychic attunement to the collective mood. Mars as the Atmakaraka places a soul that is here to build, compete, and conquer, not in the crude sense but in the architectural sense, for these are the engineers, the surgeons, the military strategists and entrepreneurs who are genuinely most alive when there is a problem that requires courage and decisive action, and their career charts almost always show a restless accumulation of ventures rather than a single linear climb. Mercury's Atmakaraka signature is perhaps the most versatile of all, producing souls drawn to information, communication, and the elegant exchange of ideas. Traders, writers, analysts, educators, and technologists all fall within Mercury's domain, and the remarkable thing is that these natives rarely suffer from a lack of opportunity but rather from an abundance of paths, which is why the 10th house placement of Mercury, especially in a dual sign like Gemini or Virgo, can sometimes produce careers that reinvent themselves completely every decade. Jupiter as the Atmakaraka is the placement that the ancient texts speak of with the greatest reverence, for it marks a soul whose very purpose is oriented toward wisdom, mentorship, and the expansion of human understanding. These are the teachers who change lives, the advisors behind powerful institutions, and the philosophers whose work outlives them. And when Jupiter's Atmakaraka energy connects with the 10th house, the career almost always carries an element of transmission, of passing something sacred forward. Venus as the Atmakaraka introduces a soul here to understand beauty, harmony, and the profound relationship between aesthetic value and material abundance. This is the signature of the luxury brand architect, the performing artist who fills arenas, the diplomat who resolves conflict through grace rather than force, And in career terms, Venus Atmakaraka natives often discover that their most authentic professional success arrives not when they chase conventional definitions of achievement but when they dare to build something genuinely beautiful. Saturn's Atmakaraka may be the most quietly powerful of all, because Saturn as the sole significator indicates a being who has come to master discipline, delayed gratification, and the kind of structural excellence that only emerges through decades of patient refinement. Their careers rarely explode early with dramatic flourish, but they build with a compounding solidity that ultimately produces legacies of extraordinary durability. And the 10th house dasha periods of Saturn in such charts often mark the most defining professional chapters of an entire lifetime. What makes the Atmakaraka system so breathtaking in its precision is the way it interweaves with everything we have already explored: the 10th house lord, the Raja Yogas, the Navamsa, creating a multi-layered confirmation that the same truth is being spoken in different astrological dialects simultaneously. And when 3 or 4 of these systems all point toward the same type of career expression, the astrologer is no longer reading a probability but witnessing the clarity of a cosmic instruction that was written long before the native drew their first breath. And so we arrive now at one of the most practical and electrifying intersections in all of Vedic astrology, the Aruda Lagna, a mathematical point that reveals not who you truly are at the soul level, but how the world perceives you, how your professional image lands in the marketplace, and why 2 people with nearly identical inner charts can experience wildly different levels of public career success. The Aruda Lagna is calculated by counting the same number of signs from the ascendant lord as the ascendant lord is from the ascendant itself, and while that sounds technical, what it produces is nothing less than your cosmic reputation, the energy that precedes you into every boardroom, every client meeting, every collaboration, before a single word is spoken. When the Aruda Lagna falls in a sign ruled by Mercury, for instance, the native is seen by the world as sharp, communicative, intellectually agile. People instinctively bring them problems that require analysis, negotiation, and quick thinking, making careers in consulting, media, finance, and technology feel almost magnetically drawn to their orbit. A Jupiter-ruled Aruda Lagna, by contrast, wraps the native in an aura of wisdom and trustworthiness. Others perceive them as the elder, the guide, the authority figure even when they are young, and this perceived gravitas opens doors in education, law, counseling, and leadership that remain frustratingly closed to those with identical qualifications but a different cosmic signature. What makes the Aruda Lagna so strategically powerful is that it can be consciously worked with. Once you know the sign and its lord, you understand the costume the universe has already dressed you in, and rather than fighting that perception, the wisest career move is to inhabit it fully, align your branding and presentation with it, and let the world's existing impression of you become a professional tailwind rather than a puzzle you never solve. The planets placed in the Aruda Lagna itself add further texture. A Venus in the Aruda brings beauty, elegance, and aesthetic refinement to the public image, making careers in luxury, design, fashion, and the arts feel almost inevitable. While a Mars placement creates a warrior reputation, the person others call when something needs to be driven forward with force, courage, and decisive momentum. Rahu placed in or aspecting the Aruda Lagna is particularly fascinating, because Rahu amplifies visibility in ways that can feel almost disproportionate. These are the individuals who seem to attract attention, followers, and public fascination beyond what their conventional credentials might explain, making modern careers in entrepreneurship, social media, film, and disruptive innovation territories where their Rahu-charged image generates extraordinary leverage. Now we must speak of the 11th house and its profound, often underestimated role in career success, because in Vedic astrology the 11th is the house of gains, networks, fulfilled desires, and the communities that sustain long-term professional prosperity, and a chart with strong 10th house energy but a weakened 11th often produces talented individuals who create brilliantly but struggle to convert that brilliance into consistent, compounding financial reward. The Lord of the 11th house and the planets placed within it reveal the specific channels through which professional abundance flows. An 11th Lord in the 3rd house, for example, suggests that income and opportunity arrive through communication, writing, siblings, short journeys, and courageous self-initiated effort, while an 11th Lord in the 9th creates a native whose greatest financial chapters are unlocked through higher education, foreign connections, publishing, and the steady cultivation of philosophical or spiritual credibility. When the 10th Lord and the 11th Lord form a relationship, through conjunction, mutual aspect, or exchange of signs, the chart is whispering something remarkable. That the native's career and their financial abundance are not separate journeys requiring separate effort, but a single unified river flowing in the same direction. And recognizing this alignment is often the missing piece that transforms a capable professional into someone whose work and wealth grow together with a momentum that feels, to all who witness it, unmistakably destined. Now, beyond the 10th and 11th Lords, there is a third pillar of career destiny that many students of Jyotish overlook entirely, the second house and its lord, the house of accumulated wealth, voice, and family lineage, whose condition quietly determines whether the abundance flowing from your career actually stays with you or dissolves as quickly as it arrives. The second house is not merely about money in the abstract, it is about the specific form your wealth takes, whether it arrives as land, as gold, as salary, as royalty, as inheritance, and a well-placed second lord in the 10th, for instance, speaks of someone whose professional role itself becomes the vault, the career and the accumulation inseparable, the work desk and the treasury sitting in the same room. Saturn in the second house is one of the most misread placements in all of Vedic astrology. Students see it and fear poverty, but the ancient commentaries are far more precise. Saturn here delays and disciplines accumulation rather than denying it, often producing natives who struggle financially in youth but build, brick by patient brick, a material foundation in their middle and later years that outlasts nearly everyone around them. Jupiter's relationship to the second house carries an entirely different fragrance. When Jupiter aspects the second lord, or sits within the second house itself with dignity, the chart is describing a native whose words are their currency, whose advice, whose teaching, whose philosophical articulation becomes a source of income in ways that are sometimes difficult even for the native to fully explain, as though the universe places a quiet premium on everything they say. The sixth house enters the career conversation in a way that surprises beginners. It is the house of service, of daily work, of competition and obstacles. And a powerful sixth house or a well-placed sixth lord does not indicate struggle so much as it indicates someone built for the arena, someone who finds their professional sharpening in environments of challenge, whose chart is essentially saying, this person does not merely survive competition, they are energized by it. Mars as the sixth lord placed in the 10th house is a placement that has appeared repeatedly in the charts of surgeons, lawyers, military officers, and competitive athletes, not because Mars forces a career path, but because the native carries within them a particular quality of decisive, fearless professional action that naturally seeks fields where precision under pressure is not the exception but the daily condition. The placement of the Sun in the birth chart, separate from house lordship, carries the question of authority. Where the Sun sits is where the native is being asked by the cosmos to develop sovereignty, to step into a role of leadership or individual recognition. And when the Sun occupies the 10th house with strength, the career almost always has a public-facing dimension, a quality of being seen and acknowledged, where anonymity would feel not just uncomfortable but genuinely contrary to the soul's design. Venus in the career houses speaks a language of refinement, relationship, and beauty. A 10th house Venus in an artistic sign like Taurus or Libra has appeared in the charts of designers, diplomats, filmmakers, and performers with a striking consistency, not as a guarantee but as a persistent whisper that the native's professional genius is inseparable from their aesthetic sensibility, their ability to make something that the world finds not merely useful but genuinely beautiful. The Atmakaraka, the planet holding the highest degree in the birth chart, the planet that in Jaimini astrology represents the very soul's deepest intention across this lifetime, when placed in the 10th or connected to the 10th lord, elevates the career from profession to purpose, suggesting that what the native does in the world is not incidental to their spiritual unfolding but is, in fact, one of its primary vehicles, that the boardroom and the inner journey are, for them, the same road. What emerges when you study all of these threads together? The 10th house, its lord, the planets within it, the 11th house, the second house, the 6th, the Sun, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and the Atmakaraka, is not a rigid prescription but a living, breathing portrait of a human being's unique professional soul, and the extraordinary gift of Jyotish is that it does not reduce you to a type but reveals you in your irreducible specificity, as though the universe signed your birth chart. The way an artist signs a canvas, with full intention, with nothing accidental, and with a confidence that what was created is exactly what was meant to be. And yet knowing this portrait exists is not the same as knowing how to read it, because Jyotish, like any living language, is not a list of rules but a grammar. And the difference between a native speaker and a student is the difference between someone who feels the meaning and someone who merely translates it word by word, missing the poetry that lives between the syllables. This is why the ancient teachers insisted that chart reading begins not with the planets but with the person, that before you look at the 10th house you must first sit quietly with the chart as a whole, the way a sculptor circles a block of stone before making a single cut, feeling for what is already inside it, waiting to be revealed rather than imposed. Planetary dignity, the difference between a planet in exaltation, in its own sign, in a friendly sign, in a neutral sign, in debilitation, is not a moral judgment but a measure of fluency, because a debilitated planet is not a broken planet. It is a planet speaking a language it finds difficult, and the chart often shows compensating strengths nearby, the way a person who struggles with words may paint with extraordinary precision. Aspects, too, are conversations. Jupiter aspecting the 10th house is like a wise elder sitting in on every important meeting, expanding the native's professional vision and quietly blessing their public conduct, while Saturn's aspect is the elder who never lets you forget the cost of cutting corners, who insists that the building be done properly even when it slows everything down. What Jyotish asks you to notice, as you layer these readings together, is where the chart's energies converge, because a chart that shows Saturn strong, the 6th house active, and the Lagna in an earth sign is telling you the same story from 3 different directions. And when the universe repeats itself that consistently, it is not being redundant, it is being emphatic. The timing dimension, which Jyotish addresses through the dasha system, the planetary period sequences that unfold across a lifetime, is where the blueprint of the birth chart becomes a lived experience in real time. Because the talents indicated by Venus in the 2nd house may remain quietly folded inside a person until Venus Dasha arrives and suddenly the world seems to want exactly what they have been carrying all along. There are charts where the career blooms in the 30s, others where it only finds its true form past 50, and Jyotish holds both with equal equanimity, because it does not measure success by when it arrives but by whether it is authentic, asking not whether you became wealthy young but whether what you built was actually yours, whether it bore the signature of your particular soul rather than the imprint of borrowed expectations. This understanding has the power to dissolve a particular kind of suffering, the suffering of the person who looks sideways at someone else's career and wonders why their own path is slower, stranger, less conventional. Because when you see that the other chart simply runs on a different clock, that their Jupiter Dasha arrived at 30 and yours arrives at 42, the comparison loses its sting and what remains is curiosity about your own unfolding. And this, perhaps, is the deepest practical gift that Vedic astrology offers the person standing at a career crossroads, not a guaranteed outcome, not a shortcut, not even a definitive answer, but a quality of attention. The ability to look at your own life with the same reverence and specificity with which the universe looked at you on the day you arrived, as though your path matters, as though your timing is not a mistake, as though you are, in exactly the form you are, precisely on schedule. And yet there is one more layer that the ancient seers embedded into this system, something that modern career counselors rarely speak about, which is the idea that your chart does not merely describe what you do for a living, but what you are meant to experience through your work, as though the universe is less interested in your job title and far more interested in the quality of soul that the journey of earning your living is designed to produce in you. This is why 2 people can hold the same profession, both surgeons, both engineers, both entrepreneurs, and yet one finds in it a devotional calling and the other finds only exhaustion. Because the chart reveals not the outer costume of career but the inner curriculum, the specific lessons that your 10th house, your 6th house, your Saturn, your Rahu have conspired to teach you through the particular friction and grace of professional life. Consider the person with Saturn ruling the 10th house and placed in the 12th, a configuration that on the surface reads as delay, as hidden work, as career conducted behind closed doors. And yet the seers would say this soul is being schooled in the rare art of working without recognition, of building something whose value cannot be measured by applause, which is perhaps the most spiritually demanding curriculum that professional life can offer. Rahu in the 10th house deserves its own moment of contemplation here, because this placement has launched some of the most unconventional, boundary-breaking careers imaginable, people who step into industries that did not exist before them, who become known for doing something their own culture or family had no template for, and the discomfort of that originality is precisely the lesson Rahu is administering. The 12th house itself, so often feared as the house of loss, is in truth the house of liberation, and when strong planets connect the 10th and the 12th, the chart is whispering that this soul's most meaningful work will happen at the edges of the visible world, in foreign lands, in hospitals, in spiritual organizations, in the quiet architecture of service that the world benefits from but rarely photographs. What the Bhagavad Gita calls nishkama karma, action without attachment to fruit, is not merely a philosophy, it is, for certain charts, the literal structural description of how their career must operate if it is to work at all. Because some planetary combinations only release their abundance once the ego releases its grip on how the reward is supposed to arrive and when. There is something deeply settling about understanding that your chart carries within it not just timing but temperament, that the reason you have always worked differently, rested differently, been motivated by different things than your colleagues is not a character flaw but a cosmic specification, as precise and intentional as the angle of light that hits a prism and produces that particular color and no other. The ancient text Brihat Parashara Ora Shastra, from which so much of classical Vedic astrology flows, describes the birth chart as a map of prarabdha karma, the portion of accumulated action that has ripened enough to be lived in this lifetime. And when you hold your career questions inside that frame, the anxiety of am I doing enough softens into the more honest question of am I being faithful to what I came here to work through. This is the invitation that Vedic astrology extends at the end of every serious consultation, not to hand your agency over to the planets, but to enter into a conscious conversation with them, to understand the weather of your own sky well enough that you can dress appropriately, choose your moments, and walk forward with the particular kind of courage that comes not from certainty but from deep self-knowledge. And so as we move toward the final chapters of this exploration, carry with you this single understanding, that the birth chart is not a ceiling above your ambition but a seed map of your potential, drawn in the language of stars, waiting for the conditions of effort and awareness and time to coax it into full flowering, and that the most powerful career move you may ever make is simply to learn to read it. And now we arrive at one of the most quietly transformative intersections in all of Vedic astrology, the moment when the birth chart stops being a map of who you are and begins to function as a compass pointing toward what you are meant to build, the precise territory where your particular genius and the world's particular hunger finally meet. Consider the 10th house, the Karma Bhava, the house of public action and professional destiny. It is not merely the house of career in the way a resume lists job titles, but the house of your dharmic contribution, the specific shape your effort takes when it enters the world and becomes something larger than yourself, something that outlasts the moment of its making. The planet that rules your 10th house carries within it the entire vocabulary of your professional nature. Saturn ruling the 10th from Taurus speaks in the language of endurance and structure and slow accumulated authority, while Jupiter ruling from Pisces speaks in the language of wisdom transmission, expansion, and the kind of leadership that uplifts rather than commands. But Vedic astrology does not stop at the 10th house alone, and this is where its sophistication surpasses simpler systems. The 2nd house governs earned wealth and the resources you naturally attract. The 6th house governs service and daily discipline and the competitive arena you are best equipped to survive. And together these three houses form a sacred triangle that reveals not just what you do but how you sustain it. When benefic planets gather in the 11th house, the house of gains, of networks, of fulfilled ambitions, the chart is whispering that your greatest professional breakthroughs will not come through solitary effort but through the extraordinary quality of the communities you build and the alliances you nurture with the same care a gardener gives to the most promising vines in the garden. The Atmakaraka, the soul significator, that planet which has traveled the highest degree in your chart and therefore carries the deepest imprint of your soul's intention. When this planet aspects your 10th house or sits within it, The career that truly fulfills you will always be the one that feels less like ambition and more like remembering, like returning to something ancient within yourself that modern life had temporarily obscured. Transits and dashas together form the timing engine of your professional life. A powerful Rahu dasha activating a well-placed 10th lord can unleash years of almost electric professional acceleration, while a Saturn transit over the midheaven asks you to rebuild your foundations with the patience of a craftsman who knows that only what is built slowly and honestly will stand long enough to matter. The Navamsa chart, the D9, beloved by experienced Jyotishis as the chart of destiny's deeper texture, reveals whether the promise of your Rashi chart will actually manifest in material terms. A strong 10th house in the Navamsa is the signature of a soul whose professional gifts will not remain potential but will crystallize into real-world achievement through sustained and conscious effort. There is a teaching from the classical texts that carries particular weight here, that the planet placed in the 10th house does not simply describe your career but describes the quality of your public soul, the face your deepest nature presents to civilization. And when you align your professional choices with that planetary quality, work stops feeling like labor and begins to feel like the most natural expression of who you came here to be. And so we leave this sacred chamber of the birth chart with a final understanding that will carry you into the closing movement of this exploration. That Vedic astrology's greatest gift to the seeker of career clarity is not a predetermined answer but a precision question, not what should I do but who, at the very deepest level of your cosmic design. Were you already in the process of becoming the moment the stars fixed their gaze upon the exact coordinates of your first breath? And now we arrive at the threshold of synthesis, the place where everything learned across this journey begins to crystallize into something you can carry forward, not as abstract philosophy, but as a living compass that breathes with your own name written in the stars. The Vedic seers understood something that modern career counselors are only beginning to rediscover, that human beings do not choose their greatest work so much as they remember it. The way a river does not choose its course but simply follows the contour of the land it was always meant to traverse. Consider for a moment the difference between a career built from fear, from what the market demands, from what the family expected, from what seemed safest in a world of uncertainty, and a career built from the recognition of your own planetary signature, your own dermic fingerprint pressed into the fabric of time. The dashas, those great planetary time cycles that unfold across a human life like chapters in an ancient epic, are perhaps the most practical gift of this entire system, because they tell you not only what you are capable of, but when the cosmic tide is rising in your favor, and when wisdom demands patience over action. A soul running the Mahadasha of Venus in a chart where Venus rules the 10th house is not living the same life as a soul running Saturn's Mahadasha, and the tragedy of ignoring this timing is not merely missed opportunity, but the exhaustion of swimming against a current that could, with awareness, have been your greatest ally. There is a reason the ancient teachers spoke of Jyotish as a lamp held up in the darkness, not to remove the darkness entirely, but to illuminate the next right step with enough clarity that the journey forward becomes purposeful rather than panicked, chosen rather than merely survived. Your Atmakaraka, that singular planet which holds the highest degree in your natal chart, the planet the soul itself has chosen as its teacher and its test, whispers continuously beneath every professional decision you have ever made, shaping your deepest satisfactions and your most confounding frustrations in ways you may have never had language for until this moment. The birth chart does not condemn anyone to limitation, it liberates each person from the exhausting performance of being someone they were never cosmically designed to be. And in that liberation lies a professional confidence that no external credential or market trend can ever fully provide. What the great Jyotishis of Varanasi and Kerala and the ancient Gurukulas knew, and what this exploration has been quietly building toward from its very first breath, is that career success in its deepest Vedic definition is not wealth accumulated or status achieved, but the feeling of profound rightness that arises when your daily work resonates at the same frequency as your soul's original instruction. You began this journey asking which business path was written in your birth chart, and perhaps now you understand that the chart was never writing a prescription, but composing a portrait, a luminous and precise portrait of the person the universe already knew you were becoming, long before you ever thought to ask the question. And so the ancient science of Jyotish, light, quite literally, the science of light, does not diminish you into a category or compress your infinite human complexity into a zodiac column. It illuminates you. The way the sun at dawn does not create the landscape but simply makes visible what was always beautifully there. Your birth chart is not a cage built around your ambition but a compass handed to you at the precise moment you arrived, and a compass, remember, does not tell you where you must go, only where true north is, so that every road you walk it awake. The great teachers of Jyotish always said that a chart read without compassion is merely arithmetic, but a chart read with the heart becomes a conversation between the cosmos and the individual, and that conversation, when you finally hear it clearly, sounds less like fate and more like permission. Permission to stop competing in arenas that were never yours, to stop measuring your progress on scales calibrated for someone else's dharma, and to turn instead toward the work that makes time dissolve, that makes Monday feel indistinguishable from Saturday, that makes effort feel less like labor and more like devotion. Whether your 10th house blazes with the ambition of Mars or glows with the quiet creativity of Venus, whether your Atmakaraka points toward service or toward leadership, toward the solitary discipline of Saturn or the magnetic generosity of Jupiter, every configuration is, in the deepest Vedic sense, a form of grace. The rishis who mapped these planetary relationships across centuries of skywatching were not building a system of judgment, they were building a mirror. And the most courageous thing any seeker can do is stand before that mirror without flinching and say, yes, this is who I am, and this is where my work belongs. Career success, then, as Jyotish has always quietly insisted, is not a destination you arrive at breathless and exhausted, it is a quality of alignment that you either inhabit or you don't, and the chart exists precisely to help you find that inhabitation before another decade slips past in the wrong direction. Take what this journey has offered, the houses, the lords, the dashas, the navamsha, the aruda, the karakas, not as rigid verdicts but as living tools, to be returned to at every crossroads, at every moment of doubt, at every morning when the work ahead of you either lights something in your chest or quietly, persistently, does not. The stars did not write your career story with a pen you cannot hold, they wrote it with light, and light by its very nature is something you can follow, something that shifts as you move, something that has always been designed to guide and never to confine. And perhaps that is the most beautiful truth Jyotish leaves in your hands as this exploration comes to its close, that the universe did not chart your path to make you feel small before the enormity of the cosmos, but to remind you, tenderly and precisely, that you were always significant enough to deserve a map. Until next time, keep your heart open and your mind quiet, and look for the answers within.